All right, so today we're going to jump right into one of the most fascinating and honestly most debated prophecies in the entire Bible. We're talking about the end time king from Daniel chapter 11. Specifically, we're going to zero in on those final, really intense verses, the ones that paint this picture of a super powerful, mysterious ruler who shows up right at the end of the line.
So, to really get what's going on here, you have to understand something about Daniel 11. The first part of this chapter is, well, it's just wild. It's so ridiculously accurate that people have called it history written in advance. It lays out all these conflicts between the Greek kingdoms after Alexander the Great, like play by play. It's so precise, it points a giant finger at one specific, really nasty king, Antiochus IV Epiphanes. You know, the guy who famously trashed the Jewish temple. But then, right after it nails him down, the whole prophecy just pivots. It takes this huge, dramatic turn.
And that is exactly where we're jumping in, right at verse 36. This is the turning point. All of a sudden, the language just shifts. The scale gets bigger, the intensity totally ramps up, and this king, he starts to sound less like a historical figure and more like some kind of cosmic player. And yeah, this is where the real arguments start.
So check out the language here in verse 36 because it's absolutely crucial. It says this king is going to do according to his will. He's not just another power-hungry ruler. We're talking about someone who acts with total freedom, like he's a god himself. He exalts himself above every god and speaks, well, the text says marvelous things against the God of gods. Now, that's just a biblical way of saying he's spewing some incredible next-level blasphemy. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. His success has an expiration date. He'll only get away with it until, quote, the indignation be accomplished. In other words, as powerful as he seems, his reign is actually on a leash, part of a much bigger divine plan.
Okay, so this big shift at verse 36 basically splits interpreters into two main camps. On one side, you have people who say, nope, this is still talking about that same guy, Antiochus IV. And to be fair, he was a really cruel dude. But the other view, which is probably more common, says that Antiochus was just the warm-up act. He was a historical foreshadowing, kind of like a blueprint for a final end-times ruler that a lot of people would call the Antichrist. So in that view, what happened way back then is a pattern for what's going to happen at the very end.
All right, let's really dig into this guy's profile, because the Bible gets super specific here, verse by verse. What really defines this king is his total and complete rejection of, well, everything. All tradition, all gods, it's all about him, to a level of self-worship that's just off the charts.
Okay, so verse 37 throws us a real curveball. It says this king will not regard the desire of women. So, what on earth does that mean? Well, there are a couple of big ideas. Some think it means he rejects all the normal stuff, human affection, family, love. He's just cold. But others think it's something deeper, more theological. Like maybe he's rejecting the hope for the Messiah, which was the ultimate desire for devout Jewish women for centuries. But honestly, whichever way you slice it, the main point is the same. This guy is so chillingly self-obsessed that he throws both natural human connection and any kind of spiritual hope right out the window.
Then, verse 38 tells us that instead of any traditional god, he honors the god of forces. And this is fascinating, right? If you're looking at it historically, this could easily be a reference to gods like Jupiter or Mars, the Roman god of war, gods that Antiochus was all about. But if you take the futurist view, it's way more sinister. It suggests this king literally worships power itself. Raw military might, brute force, control. That's his god. And it's an idol he pours all his wealth into, gold, silver, the works.
So if you take verses 37 through 39 and put them all together, you get this really chilling profile, right? You've got a ruler who just completely cuts himself off from every religious and moral tradition there is. He swaps out worship for self-worship, and the only god he bows down to is raw, brutal military power. And then he does exactly what tyrants have always done. He keeps his power by rewarding his loyal followers, handing out land and authority to anyone who signs up for his new world order.
Okay, so that's the kind of guy we're dealing with. Now, the prophecy shifts gears. It moves from who he is to what he does. And what he does is launch a final, absolutely massive military campaign. And trust me, this isn't just some regional squabble. The way it's described, it sounds a lot like the war to end all wars.
So verses 40 to 43 basically give us the battle plan. It all kicks off at the time of the end when the king of the south, who historically was the ruler down in Egypt, picks a fight. Big mistake. Our main guy here unleashes this absolutely overwhelming counterattack. We're talking chariots, cavalry, a massive navy, the whole 9 yards. He just sweeps through the glorious land, which is Israel, like a flash flood. He steamrolls Egypt, grabs all its gold and silver. His power becomes so immense that even Libya and Ethiopia just fall in line. And this right here is a perfect example of why so many people think the prophecies jumps from the past to the future. The scale of this thing just feels global. The language is what we call eschatological, a big word that just means it's all about the final events of history. This kind of complete and total domination just seems way, way bigger than the little back-and-forth wars the old historical kings were fighting.
So let's just take stock here. This king seems completely unstoppable, right? He's basically conquered the known world, he's got all of the money, and he's spit in the face of every god. He's on top of the world. But the prophecy is quietly building to a really dramatic, really sudden ending.
And then in verse 44, we see the first little crack in his armor. Even with all his power, rumors, just tidings from the east and the north start to bother him. Now, historically, this fits perfectly with threats Antiochus had from places like Parthia and Armenia. And these reports just send him into a rage. So he launches one last brutal campaign to, as the text says, to destroy and utterly to make away many.
And where does he go to stage this final furious act? Verse 45 is crystal clear. He sets up his military headquarters, his royal tents, right in the heart of the Holy Land. When it says between the seas, it means between the Mediterranean Sea and a Dead Sea. And the glorious Holy Mountain, that's Jerusalem. I mean, he can't get more arrogant or blasphemous than that. He's literally planting his flag, his throne, in the one place on earth God called his own. And then the knockout punch. Just like that. At the absolute peak of his power, with his command center set up in the holy city itself, he just comes to his end. There's no big final battle, no alliance of nations rises up to take him down. He just falls. And the text says, none shall help him. His end is sudden, it's lonely, and it doesn't come from any human army but from God.
And this is the really cool part, because this ending actually fits both interpretations perfectly. If you're looking at history, Antiochus IV really did die suddenly. He got some horrible disease while he was out on a campaign in the east, totally alone, far from any help. It was a pathetic, lonely end for such a monster. And if you're looking to the future, well, this verse predicts an even more dramatic finale, a direct, supernatural judgment that takes this guy out right at the peak of his global rebellion against God.
And that really leaves us with the big question to chew on, doesn't it? Is Daniel 11 just predicting one single event, either in the past with Antiochus or one still to come? Or is it doing something more? Is it revealing a timeless pattern? A pattern of how arrogant, godless power always rises, always persecutes, and is always ultimately brought to an end by a power that is infinitely greater? It's definitely something to think about.